I mean, if you're someone like me who reads these blogs and vlogs, it's very easy to already assume it's in the desert, right? So then I find this. This is from 2014. This is Mysterious Writings, Jenny Kyle's page. Again, dealing with extremely pale pink. So I need to boost the magnifying power. The question. In 2014, June 28th, Mysterious Writings with Forrest Fenn. Your words and actions say you are a friend and lover of the environment. More than most, in quotes. Do you follow the leave no trace, and did you while hiding the chest, i.e. stay on established trails? Leave no trace is the outdoor philosophy that you, for outdoorsmen, the philosophy that you literally try to leave no trace. You don't leave a piece. You don't leave chewing gum. You don't leave anything. You don't leave trash, obviously. You don't leave anything. You try not to even leave evidence that you even walked there if you can, which is kind of insane. But Fenn says, buddy, I think you're trying to get me in trouble, but that's where I am most of the time anyway, so I'll answer your questions. You may as well ask me if I love the air. I don't know, but I certainly am an appreciator of nature. Leave no trace is a rhetorical statement, not intended to be taken literally. For instance, it's not feasible for you to not leave a footprint somewhere or a dry fly snagged high on a tree limb left by your back cast. But I agree with the philosophy of the phrase. I dislike seeing beer cans scattered around when I am fantasizing that I'm the only person who has ever been to that spot. Generally speaking, there are places where one should stay on established trails. Yellowstone is one. However, it reminds me of the worn-out axiom, if you ain't the lead dog, the scenery never changes. When I am in the mountains or in the desert, the last place I want to be is on the trail. Ain't no adventure in that for me. There isn't a human trail in very close proximity to where I hid the treasure. Fenn. We're back to the desert again. He's just like drawn to this image of the desert, and you can't help but read this stuff and go, I'm really starting. If you really read these closely, you see him referring to being in the desert a lot. It's kind of something, right? Okay, so this is 2015. This is from Outside Magazine, 2015. Fenn says, I have some advice for anybody that's searching for treasure or anyone that goes into the mountain, the winter time or... I have some advice for anybody that's searching for treasure or anyone that goes into the mountain, the winter time or into the desert in the summertime. You'll need to be prepared for the elements primarily. Of course, there are rattlesnakes and there are grizzly bears and there's all sorts of things that are no more dangerous to anybody searching for the treasure than even a hunter or a fisherman. But the search has brought a new kind of person into the mountains, people from Florida and Louisiana. By the way, are you like me when he just casually mentions grizzly bears that you're suddenly thinking, well, ain't that many places in the Rocky Mountains where there's grizzly bears? I think you certainly have in Yellowstone. I mean, where else do you have them? Glacier Park in Montana? I don't know. Definitely Yellowstone. I don't know, I just thought that was weird. I mean, not weird, but you know what I'm saying? He says that a lot. There's, watch out for those grizzly bears. Well, where else would it? He's eliminating more than half the hunt when he talks about grizzly bears. You know, there are no grizzly bears in New Mexico. There are none in Colorado. I don't think there are any in Wyoming, except for Yellowstone. Maybe Custer Gallatin, which is connected to Yellowstone. I don't know. Okay, getting back to where I was. Search is broad. He's basically saying people from Florida and Louisiana, places where you don't have mountains, don't understand that you can get stuck in the mountains and spend the night in your car, and the desert in the summertime is unrelenting. You have to have water. I think the problem that searchers make, is that they don't dwell long enough on the first clue. If you can't find the first clue, you can't find anything. I mean, there's people driving down the street looking for a blaze. I literally did that. I wasn't driving down the road up in Colorado trying to find the blaze, just looking for a blaze. I just happened to see a blaze that stood out so much. I went, holy moly, on the Bear Creek thing in my Molly Brown videos. Okay, so now we go to 2010. One of the earliest, things where he's quoted. This is the Santa Fe Radio Cafe. This is when he walked down the street and went to the radio station. And he's interviewed. Now, this is not about the treasure. This is about his bells and his jars, right? Are we familiar with that? Those of you that knew the hunt. Forrest Fenn made these bronze bells and jars. He would put sayings on them. He would go out and bury them, not hide them. He buried these, and he buried them deep. He buried them so deep that he didn't want metal detectors to pick them up. I think he said they're more than 3 feet deep in the ground somewhere. And he said he did it indiscriminately. He didn't do it for someone to find him. He did it for someone to maybe find it 1,000 years from now. I think these bells and jars sometimes get a little confused with the treasure hunt. But I thought that it was interesting when he says, he's talking about his jars, and he says, another one says, if you should ever think of me 1,000 years from now, please ring my bell so I will know. And I'm burying these bells deep, just indiscriminately out in the desert. Later in the same portion, he says, and I said in my book, all of New Mexico is going to be covered in houses and asphalt, to the point where we can't go outside and look across the desert for the thrill of seeing nothing at all. We don't know where we are going. Things are happening too fast. Not trying to confuse the issue, just saying again, when he's talking about these bells and jars, he almost makes it sound and quotes about them like he only buried it in New Mexico and in the desert. I don't know that for certain, but that seems to be, he alludes to burying them in New Mexico and in the desert. So again, we're back thinking about the desert, even though these are not the treasure. Still. Here we have a quote from 2013. This is April 27th, 2000. This is a report from Santa Fe with Lorene Mills, third appearance. Fenn says, well, you know, New Mexico is no different from Colorado and Montana and Wyoming and Utah and Idaho. It's the Rocky Mountains. There are certain rules that you need to observe when you go into the forest. There are mountain lions, there are bears, and there are porcupines, there are skunks, and it gets cold at night. And you can fall over a rock. And he says, I remember the first time I went to Alaska fishing. I got off the plane and I looked around and I said, the human being is not supposed to be here. Lorraine says, especially with the mosquitoes this size. I assume she's doing the old, this size, they're big. Ben says, water angels. That's what he calls mosquitoes. Mosquitoes carry you away in the water every place. I don't know what that means. To me, it was a foreboding. I love to fish up there, but people should use, I think you need to use more caution in the summertime than you do in the wintertime. Santa Fe is 2,000 feet above Denver. I mean, this is high desert. It gets hot in the summertime, particularly if you're in the desert. You need a lot of water. It gets cold at night. It may be 90 degrees in the summertime, but you need a jacket at night. I think most people know that there are always some that don't, and they learn the hard way. He's discussing searchers, right? I mean, who are these people he's talking about that are learning the hard way? I guess he could be talking about just in general, people sometimes don't think of dressing properly for where they are. But I would assume that we're talking in context of the treasure hunt since he's being interviewed. Here we are. This is, can you hear me going? January, February, March, April, May. May 25th, 2016. A guy named, this is the Last Words podcast. You guys all keeping up with what I'm saying? It's a very extremely simple premise. We're talking about the theme and the meme that the treasure is somewhere out in the desert, and what Fenn is telling us about the desert in relation to the hunt. And he has basically been saying you need to be prepared, you need to be dressed properly, you need to have water. I'm reading along just thinking, well, the desert's as good a place as any as far as I'm concerned, especially remembering places like Chaco Canyon in New Mexico. If he did, when he was a younger man on these flying trips, or maybe not a younger man, just flying, and, he would go into canyons in his plane and stuff, and you see that Chaco Canyon, man, you look it up, that place is obviously I'll have some pictures of it up, but that's a pretty incredible looking place. For a guy like him that loves the Indians and ancient Indians and artifacts and stuff, I could easily see Fenn looking at Chaco Canyon and saying, I want to be buried here. I want to die here. And it's not impossible. You have to go out a single road. I think it's a dirt road. And, it's fairly remote. But you can go out there and you can look around and do whatever. And who's to say that's not exactly what he did, right? Okay. So, this is 2016, May, the Last Words podcast. Adler says, I'm not sure where I got this, but someone wrote that the urge for you, that you told them the urge to collect started at the age of 9. When you found an arrowhead in a plowed field in central Texas, and you still claim it's your most treasured object, you said it was a thrill and that started me on a long journey of adventure. Fenn says it's true. I wrote a book about that called The Secrets of San Lazaro Pueblo. So anyway, he goes on about that, and he says, is that not, he's talking about finding this arrowhead and how ancient it was, and it's 2,000 years, people, it's been waiting to be picked up, and he picked it up. He said, is that not exciting? I picked it up and looked at my father, and the expression on his face when he saw the expression on my face was something that's burned into my memory. It'll stay there forever. I wish more fathers would take their sons and daughters out into the countryside, not necessarily looking for arrowheads, but looking for, roll a log over and see what's under it. You're going to find ants and worms and grubs and beetles and make notes. There's so much to be learned in the mountains and in the desert. We are too sedentary today. Adler says, yes, you walk outside and there's adventure waiting. Fenn says that's right. Again, we're back in the desert. Now, he's talking, and when I first read that, I thought, wow, that look in each, he sees his father kind of, the joy in his father's eyes that he sees Fenn really kind of comprehending whether he's found this arrow and how it was burned into his memory. And I thought, that's where the blood, that's where the treasure is, right? But no, this is when they're in Texas, so it couldn't be. That's how easy it is for the mind to just take off of this stuff. Just because he said it was seared into his memory, you think that must be the special spot. It's not, unless he's lied to us. Or later. All right. Let's see if I'm getting to my spot. All right. So my point on this is that at this point, I'm going along and I'm saying, you know what? Maybe it is Chaco Canyon, or maybe it's some other desert place. Certainly sounds like he alludes to deserts a lot. He's been in he's quoted from, 2011 to 2016, etc. And I'm quite taken with the idea. I think it would be kind of cool to go out a desert place. I've never really been in the desert except for Vermilion Creek in Colorado. Went to Vermilion Creek. That was technically it was desert. You had pinyon trees of all things. Were all over the place. They were very much like mesquite trees, kind of low shrub-like, gnarly trunk trees that are really tough. Because they don't. They're in an arid environment. It's kind of windy sometimes, I'm sure. But I've never really though been out in the desert, like you see in the old, well, not the old movies, just movies like where people out in the desert with cactus and all that. I guess I traveled through it. I was a kid going to Disneyland. I was a little kid. That's about it when we went out west. So anyway, here we are, Mysterious Writings. Featured question with Forrest Fenn on the Thrill of the Chase. The featured question, it's 2017. 2017. Just one second, please.